Next to the
It really is.
Hagley Ferrymead.
That's where all the tourists stop.
Yeah, no.
Oh, good.
Didn't have too much bubbly last night?
What's that?
I had too much bubbly last night.
I
think we'd encourage
I knew I was coming in this morning.
It's-
We'd have to launch.
If you have
And then you'd have to stop.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Good.
Thank you very much. So our board is focused on our priorities. There probably were lots of smaller things we could have done, but this is the key stuff we really want the council to consider and to fund. The Linwood Ballston pool is obviously the largest capital program in the area, and it is something that, well, we've had our first conversation with staff now about the process that we're going to go through. We're really concerned that the initial amount that's been allocated for the planning phase is not enough. And when you compare that to the $20,000 more that's allocated for the planning in the first year for the Ballston Volunteer Library rebuild, it really doesn't seem like enough to get that planning underway. And we would really like a decent amount there funded for that planning. And while we're told that some can come from OPEX, that's not guaranteed, and I can't see $48,000 doing, all the geotech and those kind of things that might be needed as part of a site selection process for external rather than internal funding.
Say 48.
It's currently at 48,000 for the planning for a large facility. So in the first year, we've waited a really, really long time for this, and it's a really poor signal to the community that things will get underway when they can't see that there's a decent amount for planning. Sumner Skate Park was well over $100,000 in the planning phase, and that was tiny, and 48,000 in the first year. I can't see would be equitable with other facilities in their funding either in that planning phase. So we would really like that funded at an appropriate level. Very happy that the council have formally stated that if the process goes really well and quickly, that funding can be brought forward for the actual pool and the build itself, but would like more funding allocated for the planning. The Christchurch Coastal Pathway is, I guess it will be by the end of the year about half complete. The sections that have been done so far are mostly betterment and enhancement, but there's a particular section that council's seen part of before, and the ITE committee have seen, that is core council business. It is an area where footpath has been closed and taken away due to rockfall hazard. The rockfall hazard can't be mitigated to a point where a footpath can be reinstated. It is just too dangerous, and the pedestrians are currently trapped between the road and a drop down to the sea. There's already been one accident in the area, and we need the coastal pathway funding brought forward to ensure that that can start taking place around that area. But also it's core council business in this area, and we need more funding for the actual council footpath, not the coastal pathway, but the actual council footpath to be replaced in that area. Staff have said that this is a reasonable thing to do and completely possible. And we need both the coastal pathway funding brought forward, but also more funding in the new footpaths budget. And I know Burwood Pegasus were saying the same thing. Those footpaths in areas where footpaths have either been taken away or been really badly damaged, or areas where there's, for example, a new school going in that doesn't have footpaths. That's core council business to provide safe pedestrian access, and we would really like extra funding put on so that particular section can be done. Having the coastal pathway funding brought forward also allows the community group who are currently fundraising to do more fundraising. If council pushes out funding, it really does limit the ability of the community group, the coastal pathway group, to do any fundraising, because the funders then say, well, you don't have any funding, we can't fund you at the moment because you wouldn't get the work done. And when council are relying on the volunteers to do this work, and to do the funding for the rest of the coastal pathway project, we really do need to be supporting them in that way. Through to the Ballston Library and Toilets and Community Centre. This project was in tranche 2 of the community facilities in the long-term plan. It at one point had $400,000 taken off it to go onto the Redcliffs Library with no replacement in funding, or looking at what the community need is. This project was also originally only the replacement of the Ballston Volunteer Library and toilets. Now that staff have recognised that the current community centre is completely at the end of its life and completely not fit for purpose, it is looking like a combined project, but with still only a small budget just for the replacement of the volunteer library. When we look at other facilities around the city, for example St Albans, and the amount of funding that those facilities get for community centres, having $1.2 million for a combined volunteer library and community centre in a really deprived area is not enough, and we would like the funding to be increased on that particular project so that it can really meet the community outcomes and needs in that area. There aren't other local facilities that people can be using, and to have a new community centre built in the heart of the village with the volunteer library will really help in that community. Swimming pool charges. We're really concerned that swimming pool charges are set to increase yet again, as they do almost every year. When I've talked to people at swimming lessons at Pioneer recently, they had no idea that the plan was to take them up by nearly $1 per lesson per child. When you're looking at 10 lessons per term, 3 children going along, it really does add up over a year. And also the actual entry fees for swimming as well. The board submits that we would like to support the health and well-being of Christchurch by either having, to start with no increase in fees, but also to investigate ways of making the pools more accessible for our youth and for our low income. That may be by increasing our discount for community service card holders from 25 to 50%. It could be doing something similar to Auckland, where they have youth, in fact in Auckland they have under 18s free to all their council swimming facilities. We may not go to 18, but having access to our pools for our young people, even primary age children, is really important, and we'll encourage the parents to take them, and so there'll be more adult charges and stuff there. But the board's very keen to see that happen. Some of these the board were in agreement with the council's proposal for the getting rid of the most of the use of glyphosate in our community accessible areas, and in favour of the council's proposal on that one. The Capital Endowment Fund, we'd quite like a really clear process for funds to be accessible from the Capital Endowment Fund. And in line with the Bua Pegasus Community Board, we'd like an increase in the funding for the water treatment plant to start controlling the midge problem that is growing every year at the moment. Water stations, while I know there's some work happening in the background looking at what it is possible for cities to do in New Zealand, we currently can't either ban single-use plastic bags, we can't ban the use of plastic bottles like they do in cities overseas, such as San Francisco, but we can try and incentivise people within the city to use their own refillable bottles. This does several things. So for a relatively low cost for council installing water stations, not just drinking fountains, but ones where you can actually refill your bottle. What that does is it decreases the number of plastic bottles that are bought by people, that are thrown into generally rubbish bins rather than recycling, creating a lot more waste and often ending up in our waterways, as we saw with the big clean-up last weekend. And so actually saving council costs on recycling and waste at the same time as allowing people to use refillable bottles, drink more water instead of soft drinks, better for health. There's new research out up north that looks about it being much better for people's dental health and things as well. Because people, if they're going to buy a drink, it's actually often cheaper to buy Coke than water. But allowing people just to have the water is essential. the inner city east area, the Linwood, Stanmore Village, and that area there is one of the most deprived areas in the country. And while we agree with the council's consulted on priority to concentrate on earthquake recovery and fixing infrastructure in the east where there's been specific earthquake damage, we also remind council that they can't forget equity issues, and that areas that never had anything to start with can't be put to the side while we recover. While that area doesn't have as much liquefaction, doesn't have as much council infrastructure damage as areas further east, they had a lot of private damage, and the community is suffering. There's a growing despondency in the area and very little being done from the outside to help with that. They're not an area that are good at advocating for themselves, like areas further east are. And so I think it behooves us as a council to be doing more for this area, and we are suggesting, in line with Te Whare Roimata's submission, that $75,000 as a start be put towards council support of a community-led revitalisation process in the area. There is currently a small master plan that focuses on the actual village centre itself, but this needs to be broader than that, and community-led with council support is the way to go on this one. And
You don't want a regeneration plan under the new...
We don't know enough about what regeneration plans will mean, how long they will take, but to have a community-led process as a start, I think would really help.
There's nothing to stop a community-led process with a regeneration plan.
If we were able to have a regeneration plan in the area and be really heavily involved with that with the community,
I just
we would
hate
really
to
like
start
that.
up another model on top of what we've already got without even going down the track of... Anyway, carry on.
With
Sorry,
this one,
I didn't mean to
we're
interrupt.
really clear that we want really good community development outcomes, and that should be at the centre of this. They are deprivation level 10 throughout that area, and we really need to look at how we help those who currently don't have the resources to help themselves. The Linwood Avenue School Community Pool has been run the last 2 years, like the Dollar Pool in Brighton, and rather than having to apply to many funders each year while we work on the Linwood Ballston Pool, we would really like council to just say, listen, this is important, we need to get kids in this area swimming over summer. The Linwood area generally is the area of the city that has the lowest car ownership. When you look at all the census data, they don't have the access to travel to the beach, to Pioneer, to Jelly Park, and having that school pool accessible for a gold coin has been great the last 2 years, and for council to support that for a small cost until the Linwood Ballston pool gets up and running, we think is incredibly valuable, and we would like the council to do that. The old nursery site has been demolished. There are probably issues that it will be a hail site, but currently and we've been trying to ask for this for a couple of years, the Linwood League operate, and there'll be 15 or 16 teams, I guess, if you're playing two against each other, playing in an evening in the dark. There's currently all afternoon on the weekend, there's cars parked between the trees on Linwood Avenue, down the middle there. There's a huge lack of parking. There's been many close calls with pedestrians and cars crossing Linwood Ave to get to those car parks. The old nursery site is adjacent to Linwood Park, where they play league. Having a gate put in and allowing access for car parking for Linwood League would solve a lot of problems in the short term. And there's currently $40,000 set aside in a couple of years' time to do some remediation work, and we'd quite like that brought forward to help with making that an accessible car park for League over the next few years until the site, there's a decision on what to do with that site. It would make a big difference to how the area is used and to pedestrian safety, also to our trees down Linwood Avenue, which look brilliant but are currently having cars parked underneath them all the time, which won't be doing their roots any good. Talk to the city arborists. Mount Pleasant Community Centre, as a council you heard from them several weeks ago and made a loan, and we'd quite like that converted into a grant at this point, and I know that there was feedback from councillors that they should, the Mount Pleasant Community Centre should ask that in the annual plan, and we are supporting them in that and asking for that as well. The last point here is on the electricity supply. Council's contract will be up in 2017, and we would like council, in line with its move in sustainability policies, move towards electric vehicles, to be fuelling those vehicles and the other facilities in council with renewable energy. Currently, council has a mix, and it's being using power from non-renewable sources, and we think that as a council that we should be moving away from that into a fully renewable source. And that's our submission.
Very good.
Paul. I just want to stress a couple of points, and Sarah's done a great job when she presented it. The Linwood Ballston pool, we are happy to support it because we know the pressures the council's under, but we know that the funding set aside to get us through the planning stage is not anywhere near enough, and we want to make sure that when the funding is available, we can get the spade straight in the ground because we've done all the work, but it's going to take more than $49,000 in this coming year to actually achieve that. The other point is around the coastal pathway. We have a commitment to actually return footpaths to our residents. There is no footpath along the Peacock Scallop area. There's none. We've got the Littleton Sumner corridor works being done with NZTA. We need to be working with those guys and reinstate footpaths where we can along this corridor. It makes sense. It'll save money, and on top of that, it makes sense to clip on at the same time the coastal pathway. It will save a lot of money. So I just can't stress enough that we need to start aligning these works and making sure they're working together. And we've heard it from a lot of the various wards that this is an issue of aligning works. So I just want to stress that point. And lastly, just on the Mount Pleasant Community Centre, they can't afford this new loan. They are hoping that we will commit to turning it into a grant through the annual plan process. So I just want to stress it as well. They've taken it on board because they know they need to finish the works and they need to have that loan there to do that. That enables that to happen so they can complete their works, but they will need that converted to a grant.
Glenn, Phil.
Thank you. I'm probably like a few of us reflecting on the Te Whare Roimata and the good work they do, and just trying to work out, what might be the best kind of developmental model. Have you got, they do great things.
They do amazing. In fact, they've just taken on, they're looking at taking on the local post office because there was the one post office, 2/3 of the shops in Linwood Village disappeared in the quakes. Yeah. Underinsured, the only one is being rebuilt. And the guy who ran the post office has retired. And no one else is going to take it on. So Te Whare are taking that on as a social enterprise. And the board has helped with a small amount of funding. But it's a lot of work to do and to set up a social enterprise and to try and make that sort of thing work. And they're just getting desperate for some support.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, obviously a long-term developmental, say, Actus, that kind of, it's going to be a long time.
But in a way, that Actus was resourcing the community organisation so that they could sit at the table as an equal partner. And the approach that we've taken there is to, put some additional resource like human capital, people, into a person to run the actual community centre when it opens. So that's a slightly different arrangement, but the idea of community organisation, representative of the neighbourhood, sitting at the table as an equal partner, that speaks volumes for what you can achieve in a low decile area, much more than just having a token representation or really the council doing stuff for people.
Maybe we need to get some heads together over looking at models and...
I've made a note,
Okay.
So it's a really good point. Phil?
Thanks, Sarah. Coastal Pathway, just like clearly they've already fundraised a large amount of money themselves. My understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, is that the project came about because that group wished the Coastal Pathway to be there, and they've done, but it was initiated by that group. Okay,
that's correct.
So, and now you're saying, look, the footpath should be aligned with that work.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the moment, the key priority is to get a safe pedestrian access from the tram stop in Monks Bay around down past Peacock's Gallop. And they are the areas that
understand that.
council footpath has been removed, and that people are now walking on the seaward side where the coastal pathway is planned to go. But the council, who has already voted and resolved to prioritise pedestrian access and safety in areas where Port Hill's remediation work has gone on, you guys resolved that earlier this year or late last year. And what we want is budget to go with that to reinstate the council footpath. It makes sense at the same time to have the coastal pathway work done in that section. Because there's also no cycleway down there. I know that I addressed the ITE committee on this. The council at this stage, the coastal pathway are fundraising to do the cycleway from Ferrymead Bridge through to Sumner.
Has your board considered a difference in costs between, for example, an extension of the pathway right through, as against development of the footpath through clearly what is technically a very challenging part? Has your board considered the difference in cost?
Well, we know that there would be a difference in cost, which is why we've asked. I mean,
you're not sure what it is yet.
Currently there isn't any funding for a new footpath in this area, even though the council footpath has been taken away. There isn't any. We've been told by staff there is no funding currently for a footpath in this area.
So, thanks. So can I just ask you too about, there's been, Glenn commented about the work that Ferrymead are doing, that, and you've asked for support for them, and that's fine, in the east part. For Linwood Village, is your board, I'm just wondering, are there ways that your board might also support them? And I'm asking that particularly because clearly that is an area which is not going forward.
We'd like to support we'd like to support that area in some way, but without funding and staff support, it's hard to know what the board can do.
So I wondered though if there might be a similar community development kind of model, which using what Te Whare are doing in the Eastern City, that in fact the board might be able to support in Linwood.
They're like a block away. It's that same area that we're talking about.
So in fact that project could also support Linwood Village.
Yeah, that's right.
I see. You just hadn't referred to that there. I see.
Yeah, well, the village. I said the village has that master plan and that small bit, but we need it slightly broader than that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I know that's something the ITE committee's already asked for information on, ways to support the village. So.
Yes, and it's just how the question really too though is how in fact it can come from the business people with support. From the board as well.
Yeah, but
it's not much business in there, really.
For a vibrant community, having both small local independent businesses and community groups around them is really important, and so that you don't become just the dormitory suburb. And it's the same in many other, Edgware and Sumner and all those ones with the smaller local villages. This one's really struggling, as many of them are. And but it's not just for the businesses in the village. A community development approach across that community will also support the businesses in that village because they're needed in that area.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.